G'day everybody, how you going today? It is so good to see you. I do hope that you are super well. Yes, indeed. Here we go again. Firmware for the Z9. There is even more. Yes, we have firmware 3.1 for the Z9 arrived today. Let me share more with you about this, plus a few little interesting tidbits that we can pick up about perhaps the potentiality of even more Z9 firmware, just by the fact of what an engineer mentioned at CP+. Let me tell you about that and more right now. Yes, indeed, we have a new firmware update. It's 3.1. There's a few new additions and a couple of little super duper minor bug fixes. I have already installed a 3.1 into my Z9 right here. It's up and running and working, and you can see the process right here. Now, if you've never done a firmware update before, it's pretty simple. You can either use your smart device to upgrade through SnapBridge, or you can pop it onto your SD card or CF Express card, pop it in, go to the firmware menu, and simply say update. It is a super simple process. In the case of the Z9, it is so much larger than all the other firmwares for all the other cameras that it takes up to 5, 6, 7 minutes. So don't worry if you think it's taking a little while. This is how long it takes, because there is so much more code in this camera than the others. For example, I think my Z6 II or Z7s, they're 30 to 35, 40 to 45 megabyte files, and that is the operating system within the camera. I believe the entire operating system, besides a little tiny little BIOS that actually allows the process of updating firmware to happen, besides that just minor thing, I believe we get a new entire operating system every time we do firmware. And like I said, the firmware in the Z9 is 2 to 3 times the size. There is so much more in there, which follows on from my previous conversation about the fact that I do think the code and the whole team, I think it's a completely different technology that we're getting in this XPEED 7 camera, and any XPEED 7 cameras that come after it will have this far more robust and large firmware. And we can simply see that literally by the file size, which literally means the lines and lines and lines of code. So yes, it's something that I should have talked about in that previous video. Clearly, it's very different. And the first thing, which I pretty much expected would have to happen at some point, it is support for the new 85mm 1.2. Very excited, and hopefully those lenses are not too far off now. I think it's the end of March that they're going to be shipping, sometime around there anyway. Can't wait to show you more about that lens. Can't wait. We have improved focus accuracy for low contrast subjects during burst photography with wide area AFS, wide area AFL, wide area AFC1, wide area AFC2, 3D tracking, or auto area AF selected for AF area mode. So that is improved focus accuracy for low contrast subjects during burst photography. Ultimately, what that means is even more accurate focus when shooting super fast when there's probably low light, which often means low contrast or just low contrast. This is something that action, sports, wildlife, birders, they're going to love to see this. Plus, well, for me, just the other day, even event photography in low light, this might be of benefit. Improved the frame advance rate during burst photography with optional flash units. Now, this is something that I haven't tested, but just recently, for the first time, I actually finally got together the Z9, because, you know, the Z9 is pretty new, and doing high-speed sync flash through TTL, and wow, it's so easy. I can't wait to show you guys more about that, because it's just fabulous. And I used it at a recent event. TTL, the flash, they're just doing all the work, and off you go. It's so good. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see more about that. And then some minor bug fixes, look, that I'm not going to read out because they're super duper minor, and I don't want to take up your time with that. I'll throw it on screen now. You can pause it now. You can read it. There we go. The Z9. Now I've talked about firmware in a recent episode and the fact that we got firmware for the Z5 and the Z50 before that, and isn't it exciting? And the fact that I think that there's two teams, one team that just pushes out all the XP 6 stuff. And I said in that video that they're probably working on something like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cameras, and I would like to thank a viewer very much for getting me the list of all of the cameras that they believe that they're working on. And I think it was something like 14. So the XP 6 team, they work hard. This is my belief, and I'm going to talk now based on my belief, because we will never know. So I will talk about my belief. Other people can talk about their beliefs. That's cool. And obviously the XP 7 team, well, they keep working too, and we get things like this. Presumably any time that they think they've tweaked something, improved something, or bug fixed, well, they may as well put it out. It's not such a big deal, is it? Besides all that error testing we talked about in the previous video. And thus, it kind of makes you think that team, they just keep working and they just keep going. And there's one little clue that's come out of CP Plus, and I saw it as a comment on Nikon rumors in regards to the release of 3.1. And it goes like this. At CP Plus, some Nikon engineers announced the fact that there would be more shutter sounds for the Z9. This very eagle-eyed commenter made the really good point that this new update to the shutter, having more sounds, is not in firmware 3.1. I think that pretty much lets us know that there is more firmware coming for the Z9, which is super exciting. Now, who knows whether it's minor or major? Don't know. Don't know what the future holds. But what we do know is that there will absolutely be more XP 7 cameras. We know that because that's the future. That's where things are going. But what that means is that the XP 7 team, they're going to keep working, they're going to keep refining, they're going to keep adding. And if you make your platform more modular, in other words, your cameras are quite similar. And I think we've seen that with the Z5, the Z6 and the Z7. They're quite similar. The firmware is similar. The operability is really similar. There's not a lot of differences between them. And if there are, over time, they try and improve that in firmware. So what I'm ultimately saying from all of this is advances in XP 7 software firmware that might come into new cameras, I'm hoping comes into, well, at that point, what will be an old XP 7, the Z9. It's obviously, when any more XP 7 cameras arrive, this will be the most senior camera. It'll be the oldest. I mean, at this point in time, it's about 15 months old. Whatever camera comes next will be 0, and from then on. Theoretically, hopefully that means as you develop for the next cameras and you develop for this camera, that development keeps rolling on for all cameras. Like we've seen with the XP 6, and over the last 4.5 years, a lot of the features have gone across a lot of the XP 7 cameras. Nobody has really been left behind. Z6 users, Z7 II users, I know. I know how you feel. Again, to reiterate, I'm one of them. I have a Z6 II, and sure, maybe there's more there, maybe not. But the fact that the whole family of cameras just keep being pushed. Some get pushed a bit further, some get pushed a bit less, some had further to be pushed because they were further behind. You know, there's a lot going on in that space. I think it's exciting news. We've got another update for the Z9 3.1. I think it's interesting news, the fact that we're going to get these new shutter sounds. They're not here yet. That means more firmware is coming. Who knows what size, what shape, and what else? But I think it will be somewhat attached to whatever camera is next. Just like we've had with the Z5, the Z6, the Z7, Z6 II, and Z7 II. Those features have slowly crept along together. It's a really interesting model. I don't know if the other camera companies do it the same way. I don't know if this is kind of new. I don't know if firmware was very unique in the DSLR days, as in unique to each camera, or it was kind of on a bigger scale and modular, whether it was kind of processor bound and driven. I don't know. I wasn't studying all of that closely. But I do feel like some patterns are forming here, and it's really interesting to me. Anyway, those who have a Z9, update your firmware. better focus under high pressure situations, low contrast, high speed. That can only be a good thing. And if you're into birding, wildlife, sport, action, events in low light situations and more, this is going to be a good thing for you. Plus the other stuff, like, hey, who doesn't want the very best firmware in their camera for the 85mm? And can I say, as one of the few pre-production testers around the world, that lens worked so well with the firmware that I had, I'm not even sure how it's going to get any better. So if it gets better, wow. All right. Now, and please let me know in the comments, what do you think of this firmware update? What do you think is going to happen next with the XP 7 firmware / team? What else could we have? What else could we get? I kind of feel like the sky's the limit. Who knows? All right, it's been so good to see you. And if this is your first time here, I would love to see you again. So please do subscribe, please share, and please like. Bye for now.